Standing in 10-degree below zero weather on Christmas Eve, I watched my father distribute expensive gifts through our frosted living room window, while my stepmother smiled coldly beside him. My thin sweater provided no protection against the bitter Colorado wind after being banished for defending my younger sister during dinner. Each breath created frozen clouds as hypothermia began setting in. Just when my fingers lost all feeling, a sleek black limousine glided down our suburban street. The passenger door opened, revealing an elegant elderly woman in a luxurious fur coat who looked directly at me, then at the house, her expression hardening with unmistakable recognition and growing fury. The woman stepped out of the limousine with surprising grace for someone her age, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the harsh weather. She approached me immediately, concern etched across her weathered but dignified features. "Good Lord, child, you're freezing to death out here," she said, wrapping her expensive fur coat around my shoulders. The warmth felt like heaven against my numb skin. I stared at her in complete confusion. Something about her face seemed familiar, but I couldn't place where I might have seen her before. "Who are you?" I managed to ask through chattering teeth. She studied my face intently, her eyes filling with what looked like a mixture of sadness and rage. "My dear Bennett, I'm Eleanor Hawthorne, your grandmother." My world tilted sideways. "That's impossible. My grandmother died 3 years ago. I went to her funeral." Eleanor's expression hardened further. "I faked my death, child. I had to discover the truth about what was happening to my family." She gestured toward the house where my father was still handing out presents, and what I found disgusted me beyond words. Before I could process this revelation, a distinguished man in a chauffeur's uniform approached us. Eleanor introduced him as James, explaining he'd been her loyal driver for 20 years. "James has been helping me conduct surveillance on this household for months," Eleanor continued. "We've documented everything your father has done since my supposed death." She reached into her purse and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "Your father told everyone I died of a heart attack. He even held a funeral with a closed casket, claiming my body was too damaged for viewing. But I was very much alive, watching from Switzerland as he transformed into something monstrous. I couldn't believe what I was hearing." "Why would you fake your death?" "To test who truly loved me versus who simply wanted my money," Eleanor replied. "I own Hawthorne Tech Industries. $2 billion in assets, Bennett. Your father knew he was named in my will, but I wanted to see what kind of man he really was when he thought I was gone." She showed me photographs of our house, taken from various angles. "We've been watching him isolate your family from outside contact. The controlling behavior, the financial manipulation, the psychological abuse. James documented everything." James nodded grimly. "Your grandmother has been trying to contact you and your sister for months, Bennett. Your father intercepts every attempt." Eleanor's voice grew cold with fury. "Marcus has stolen money he believed he inherited from my estate, money that was specifically designated for your education and your sister's future. He's been living off what he thinks is his inheritance while systematically destroying everyone in this house." She pulled out bank statements and legal documents. $3 million, Bennett. That's how much your father has taken from accounts he had no legal right to access. Money meant to ensure you could attend any college you chose." My hands shook as I looked at the evidence. Years of confusion suddenly made sense. The way my father controlled every aspect of our lives, the way he monitored our phone calls and internet usage, the way he exploded with rage whenever anyone questioned his decisions. "He's been opening your mail," Eleanor continued. "College acceptance letters, scholarship offers, job applications. We have proof he sabotaged your future at every turn." The limousine's interior light revealed more documents spread across the leather seats. Eleanor had been methodical in her investigation, building a case that would stand up in any court. "I've already contacted the FBI Financial Crimes Division," she said. "But first, I wanted to confront my son face to face, to give him one chance to explain himself before the authorities become involved." I looked back at the house, where my father was now helping my 16-year-old sister Sarah unwrap a gift. The scene looked so normal, so perfect from the outside, but I knew the truth that Eleanor had discovered. "He'll never admit to anything," I said. "He'll claim you're lying or that I'm making everything up." Eleanor smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Oh, my dear child, I have evidence he can't dispute. Financial records, audio recordings, video surveillance. Your father has been very careless in his criminality." She stood up, adjusting her coat around my shoulders. "We're going inside together, Bennett. Tonight, Marcus faces the consequences of what he's done to this family." James opened the front door of the limousine and retrieved a briefcase. Eleanor took my arm gently but firmly. "Are you ready to reclaim your life?" she asked. Eleanor and I walked up the front steps to our house, her presence commanding despite her small stature. She didn't knock. Instead, she used a key I'd never seen before to unlock the door. "This house is still in my name," she explained quietly. "The deed was never legally transferred to Marcus." We entered the living room where my father was helping Sarah arrange her new art supplies. My stepmother, Patricia, looked up from organizing gift boxes, her face immediately draining of color when she saw Eleanor. My father froze completely. The expensive watch he was examining slipped from his hands and clattered onto the hardwood floor. "Hello, Marcus," Eleanor said calmly. "Surprised to see your mother alive?" The wine glass in my father's other hand shattered against the floor. He stared at Eleanor as if she were a ghost, his mouth opening and closing without sound. "This isn't possible," he finally whispered. "You're dead. I buried you." "You buried an empty casket," Eleanor replied, "though I suspect you would have preferred the real thing once you realized how much money was involved." Sarah jumped up from the couch, confused and frightened. "Bennett, what's happening? Who is this lady?" "This is our grandmother," I said, my voice stronger than it had been in years. "The one Dad told us died." Patricia backed toward the staircase, clearly terrified by the unexpected confrontation. Eleanor noticed her movement and spoke gently. "Patricia, please don't be afraid. You're not in trouble here. You're a victim just like Bennett and Sarah." My father finally found his voice, though it came out as a harsh croak. "You can't just show up here and disrupt our lives. This is my house, my family. You have no right." Eleanor opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of legal documents. "Actually, Marcus, I have every right. Let me show you some interesting paperwork." She spread bank statements across the coffee table. $3,200,000. That's how much you've stolen from accounts that legally belong to Bennett and Sarah. My father's face went from pale to red. "That money was mine by inheritance. You left it to me in your will." "I left it in trust for your children's education," Eleanor corrected. "You forged documents to gain access to those accounts." She produced more papers, medical records declaring me mentally incompetent. Quite creative, considering they're dated after my supposed death. The handwriting analysis should be fascinating for federal investigators. Sarah started crying. "Dad, what is she talking about?" My father turned on her with sudden viciousness. "Shut up, Sarah. This woman is obviously mentally ill. Don't listen to anything she says." "Don't you dare speak to her that way," I said, stepping forward. Years of suppressed anger began boiling over. "She's done nothing wrong." "You're the one who started this mess," my father snarled at me. "Running your mouth at dinner, disrespecting everything I've done for this family." Eleanor's expression grew even colder. "Is that what you call locking a 26-year-old man outside in life-threatening weather? Parenting?" She turned to Sarah. "Sweetheart, has your father ever threatened you about discussing family problems with people outside this house?" Sarah nodded tearfully. "He says terrible things will happen if anyone finds out about our private business." "What kind of terrible things?" Eleanor asked gently. "That we'll lose the house and end up homeless. That people will take me and Bennett away. That no one will believe us because we're just kids causing trouble." Patricia spoke for the first time, her voice barely audible. "He tells me the same things. That if I try to leave or get help, he'll make sure I lose everything." Eleanor nodded knowingly. Classic financial abuse tactics: isolation, control, and fear. She looked directly at my father. "But you made a critical error, Marcus. You stole from accounts that were being monitored by federal banking oversight." My father lunged forward, trying to grab the documents. "You can't prove any of this. Those signatures are legitimate." "I have handwriting experts who would disagree," Eleanor replied calmly, moving the papers out of his reach. "Along with bank surveillance video of you forging my signature on multiple occasions." She pulled out her phone and showed us all a video clip. On the small screen, we could clearly see my father at a bank counter, carefully copying a signature from a reference document. "This was recorded 6 months ago," Eleanor said. "Would you like to explain to everyone why you're practicing my signature if I was already dead?" My father's face contorted with rage. "Get out of my house, all of you. I'm calling the police to have you arrested for trespassing and harassment." Eleanor smiled. "Please do call them, Marcus. Agent Rodriguez from the FBI Financial Crimes Unit is very eager to speak with you. I believe she has several warrants prepared." The room fell silent except for Sarah's quiet sobs. Patricia sank into a chair, looking overwhelmed by the revelations. "You have a choice," Eleanor continued. "We can handle this as a family matter with appropriate consequences and restitution, or we can let federal prosecutors handle it their way. But either option requires you to acknowledge what you've done and begin making amends." My father looked around the room at all of us, his expression growing more desperate. "This is my house. These are my children. You can't just waltz in here after 3 years and destroy everything I've built." "Everything you built was constructed on lies and stolen money," I said, finding courage I didn't know I possessed. "How many times did you tell me I was worthless? How many job applications did you sabotage? How many times did you make me believe I was the problem?" Eleanor placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. "Bennett, your father intercepted 17 college acceptance letters, including 4 full scholarships to prestigious universities." The weight of that revelation hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "MIT, Stanford, University of Virginia, and Carnegie Mellon," Eleanor listed. "All with full academic scholarships, all hidden from you because educated children are harder to control." My father's face twisted with something that might have been shame. Those schools would have filled his head with ideas, made him think he was better than his family. "No, Marcus," Eleanor said sadly. "You were afraid an educated son would recognize your abuse and find ways to escape it." She turned back to her briefcase and pulled out one final document. "This is the deed to this house. As I mentioned, it was never transferred to your name. You've been living in my property for 3 years, paying the mortgage with my money, and claiming ownership of something that was never yours." My father stared at the deed, his last defense crumbling. "You can't take our home. Where will we live? What about Sarah's school?" "Those are consequences you should have considered before committing multiple felonies," Eleanor replied. "But I'm not heartless, Marcus. I want this family healed, not destroyed. There are paths forward, but they all require honesty and accountability." She looked at each of us in turn. "The question is whether you're willing to face the truth or if you prefer to let federal investigators sort everything out." My father slumped into his chair, suddenly looking much older than his 48 years. The expensive gifts scattered around the room seemed to mock him now that everyone knew they were purchased with stolen money. "What do you want from me?" he asked quietly. "The truth," Eleanor said simply. "All of it. Starting with where you've hidden the rest of my money and ending with a genuine apology to your children for the damage you've inflicted." Before my father could respond, the doorbell rang. Eleanor checked her watch and nodded to James, who went to answer it. Moments later, a tall man in his 50s entered the living room, carrying a thick leather portfolio. "Everyone, this is David Sullivan," Eleanor announced. "He's a former police detective who now works as a private investigator. David has been gathering evidence about this family's situation for the past 8 months. David set his portfolio on the coffee table and opened it, revealing dozens of photographs, documents, and what appeared to be medical records. "Mrs. Hawthorne," David said formally, "I've completed the background investigation you requested. The findings are quite disturbing." He pulled out a medical report with Patricia's name on it. "Mrs. Patricia Hawthorne has been unknowingly consuming lorazepam for approximately 18 months. Blood tests we conducted last week show therapeutic levels of the medication in her system." "What's lorazepam?" Sarah asked. "Anti-anxiety medication," David explained. "It causes drowsiness, confusion, and memory problems when taken regularly. Someone has been mixing it into Mrs. Patricia's food or drinks." Patricia stared at the medical report in shock. "That's impossible. I don't take any medications." David showed her photographs of her coffee maker. "We tested residue from your personal coffee mug. Lorazepam powder was mixed into your coffee grounds every morning for over a year. My father had gone completely white. You can't prove I had anything to do with that. Actually, we can, David replied calmly. He produced a pharmacy receipt. This prescription was filled using your driver's license and your credit card. The dosage matches exactly what Mrs. Patricia has been consuming. Eleanor's expression was grim. Patricia, do you remember feeling confused or unusually tired over the past year and a half? Patricia nodded slowly. I thought it was stress from Marcus's behavior. I kept forgetting things, feeling dizzy. I couldn't think clearly enough to make any major decisions. That was the point, David said. Lorazepam is commonly used in cases of domestic abuse to keep victims compliant and unable to seek help. He turned to the next section of his portfolio. But that's not the most serious discovery we made. David pulled out legal documents with official court seals. Bennett, your biological mother Jennifer didn't abandon this family as you were told. My world stopped. What do you mean? Your father filed false domestic violence charges against Jennifer 5 years ago, David explained. Court records show she was forced to leave the state under a restraining order that he obtained through perjured testimony. He showed me copies of police reports. Jennifer Caldwell was accused of drug possession, child endangerment, and assault. All charges were later dropped when evidence proved they were fabricated, but by then the custody arrangement was already established. Eleanor's voice was gentle but clear. Your mother has been living in Oregon, working as a registered nurse. She's been trying to contact you and Sarah through my estate lawyers for 3 years. David pulled out a stack of envelopes, all addressed to me and Sarah at Eleanor's supposed address. Jennifer has written to you every month since she left. 163 letters that your father intercepted and destroyed. My hands shook as I looked at the return address. She's been trying to reach us this whole time? She's also been sending child support payments, David continued. $1,200 every month, deposited into an account your father controls. Money that was supposed to help with your expenses but was instead used for his personal spending. Sarah burst into fresh tears. I thought Mom didn't love us anymore. Dad said she chose drugs and some other man over her family. David's expression softened. Your mother has been clean and sober for 6 years, Sarah. She works at Portland General Hospital and has an excellent reputation. She never stopped fighting for the right to contact her children. My father finally exploded. Jennifer was a drug addict who couldn't take care of her own children. Everything I did was to protect this family from her influence. The drug charges were planted evidence, David said firmly. We have testimony from the arresting officer admitting he was paid to file false reports. The officer is currently facing his own federal charges for corruption. Eleanor opened another section of David's portfolio. There's more, Bennett. Your father has been systematically sabotaging your employment opportunities for years. David showed me printed emails from various companies. 47 job applications you submitted online. Your father accessed your email account and sent withdrawal letters to each employer, claiming you were no longer interested in the positions. That's why I never heard back from anyone, I realized. I thought there was something wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with you, Eleanor said firmly. Your father created fake social media accounts using your name and posted inflammatory content designed to make you unemployable. David showed me screenshots of Facebook and Twitter accounts I'd never created, all containing racist and offensive content posted under my name. We've traced the IP addresses back to this house, David said. Everything was posted from your father's computer while you were at work or sleeping. Patricia stared at my father with growing horror. Marcus, how could you do this to your own son? He needed to learn respect and responsibility, my father said defensively. Giving him too much independence would have ruined him. This isn't about independence, I said, anger building in my chest. This is about control. You wanted to keep me trapped here so you could continue stealing Eleanor's money. David pulled out financial records. Your father has been gambling heavily for the past 2 years. Sports betting, online poker, casino trips to Black Hawk. He's lost approximately $800,000 of the money he stole from your trust funds. Eleanor's face hardened. That explains the desperation. Marcus wasn't just stealing for luxury. He was covering massive gambling debts. The situation gets worse, David continued. Marcus owes money to several loan sharks in Denver. People who don't accept "I can't pay" as an answer. He showed us photographs of men in expensive suits. These individuals have been asking questions about this family's assets. They're under the impression that Marcus inherited significant wealth and should be able to pay his debts immediately. Sarah looked terrified. Are we in danger? David nodded grimly. These are not people who negotiate. They expect full payment within 30 days, or they begin targeting family members. My father buried his face in his hands. You don't understand the pressure I've been under, the threats they've made. So you decided to drug your wife and steal from your children? Eleanor asked coldly. How exactly was destroying your family supposed to solve your gambling problem? David pulled out the final documents in his portfolio. There's one more thing everyone needs to know. Marcus secretly married Patricia's sister Linda 6 months ago. Patricia's face went ashen. What? Bigamy is a federal crime, David explained. Marcus has been maintaining 2 households and 2 marriages simultaneously. Linda believes she's his only wife and has been promised a significant inheritance once Eleanor's estate is fully settled. Eleanor stood up, her composed demeanor finally cracking. Marcus, I gave you every opportunity to be a better man. I left you resources, property, and a family that loved you. And you've systematically destroyed all of it through greed, addiction, and control. My father looked up at her with desperate eyes. I can fix this. I can pay back the money and get counseling for the gambling. Just don't let them arrest me. It's too late for half measures, Eleanor replied. David, please call Agent Rodriguez. It's time for law enforcement to handle this situation. David reached for his phone, but before he could dial, we heard car doors slamming outside. Through the window, I could see several black SUVs parked in front of our house. It appears Agent Rodriguez has arrived, Eleanor said calmly. My father jumped up from his chair. I need time to think. I can't go to prison. My life will be over. Your life as a criminal will be over, Eleanor corrected. Whether you can build something better depends entirely on the choices you make right now. The doorbell rang again, followed by loud knocking. A woman's voice called out, FBI, we have a warrant for the arrest of Marcus Hawthorne. My father looked around the room wildly, like a trapped animal. This is all wrong. Everything got out of control. I never meant for it to go this far. Eleanor's voice softened slightly. Marcus, you're my son. Despite everything you've done, I still love you. But love doesn't mean protecting you from the consequences of criminal behavior. Agent Rodriguez entered the living room with 2 other FBI agents, all wearing bulletproof vests. She was a woman in her 40s with short black hair and a professional demeanor. Marcus Hawthorne, you're under arrest for bank fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud, Agent Rodriguez announced. You have the right to remain silent. As the agents moved to handcuff my father, he suddenly broke away and ran toward his office at the back of the house. Stop right there, Agent Rodriguez shouted, but my father slammed the office door behind him. We heard the sound of furniture being moved, like he was barricading himself inside. I have weapons, my father yelled from behind the door. And explosives. Everyone needs to leave the house immediately or people are going to get hurt. Agent Rodriguez immediately radioed for backup. We need the bomb squad and SWAT team at this location. Suspect claims to have explosive devices. Eleanor pulled Sarah and Patricia toward the front door. Everyone outside. Now. As we evacuated the house, I couldn't help thinking that this nightmare was far from over. My father had just escalated a bad situation into something potentially deadly. Within 20 minutes, our quiet suburban street had been transformed into a federal crime scene. SWAT vehicles blocked both ends of the road, while neighbors gathered behind police barriers, trying to understand why armed agents had surrounded our house. Agent Rodriguez established a command post in an FBI mobile unit parked across from our front door. Eleanor, Sarah, Patricia, and I waited inside while negotiators attempted to communicate with my father. Marcus, we need you to come out peacefully, a negotiator called through a bullhorn. No one wants to see anyone get hurt tonight. My father's voice came back, muffled through his office window. I want $50 million in cash and a helicopter to take me out of the country. Otherwise, I'm going to blow up this entire house. Agent Rodriguez looked at Eleanor grimly. Does your son actually have access to explosives? I have no idea, Eleanor replied. At this point, Marcus is clearly desperate enough to try anything. David Sullivan had been coordinating with the FBI team, sharing all his investigative materials. Agent Rodriguez, there's something else you need to know about Marcus's situation. He pulled out his phone and showed her a series of text messages. We intercepted these communications between Marcus and Linda Patterson, Patricia's sister, who he secretly married. Agent Rodriguez read the messages aloud. We're almost ready to execute the final phase. Once Eleanor and Patricia are declared legally dead, I'll inherit everything and we can disappear together. Patricia gasped. Linda knew about this plan? It gets worse, David continued. Linda has been living in a secret apartment downtown that Marcus pays for with stolen money. She's been helping him research how to fake accidental deaths. He showed us photographs of the apartment, including a bulletin board covered with news articles about inheritance, fraud, and suspicious deaths. They've been planning this for 8 months, David explained. Marcus was going to stage Eleanor's second death and make Patricia's death look like an accident or suicide. Eleanor's expression remained calm, but I could see anger burning in her eyes. How far along was this plan? Very far, Agent Rodriguez replied, looking through David's files. We found contracts with a crematorium in Nevada and prepaid funeral arrangements in Patricia's name. Sarah started crying again. They were going to kill Mom? Agent Rodriguez nodded gravely. The evidence suggests your father and Linda were planning to murder both Eleanor and Patricia to claim insurance money and inheritance funds. Before anyone could respond, we heard another vehicle arriving. A white sedan pulled up, and a woman in her 30s stepped out. She looked remarkably similar to Patricia, but younger and more stylishly dressed. That's Linda, Patricia said, pointing at the woman. That's my sister. Agent Rodriguez immediately dispatched agents to intercept Linda before she could reach the house. They arrested her in the street, handcuffing her while she screamed protests about police harassment. Through the mobile command unit's window, we watched Linda being placed in the back of a police car. She was clearly trying to see inside our house, probably looking for Marcus. Bring her here, Agent Rodriguez instructed. I want to question her about the murder conspiracy. Minutes later, Linda was escorted into the command unit in handcuffs. When she saw Patricia, her expression changed from defiance to panic. Patricia, what are you doing here? Linda asked. Marcus told me you were visiting your mother in Phoenix. Marcus lied to you, Patricia replied coldly. Just like he's been lying to everyone else. Agent Rodriguez placed a digital recorder on the table between them. Linda Patterson, you're under arrest as an accessory to fraud and conspiracy to commit murder. We have evidence that you've been helping Marcus Hawthorne plan the deaths of Eleanor Hawthorne and Patricia Hawthorne. Linda's face went white. Murder? No one said anything about murder. Marcus just told me we were going to claim his inheritance early. By faking Eleanor's death again and making Patricia's death look accidental, Agent Rodriguez clarified. That's called premeditated murder, Linda. I didn't know, Linda protested. Marcus said Eleanor was already dead and that Patricia was mentally ill. He said we were just protecting the family money from being wasted. David pulled out more documents. Linda, you purchased life insurance policies on both Eleanor and Patricia using forged signatures. You're listed as the beneficiary on both policies. Linda stared at the insurance paperwork in shock. Marcus handled all that. He said it was just paperwork to protect the estate. Eleanor finally spoke directly to Linda. Did you really believe my son was wealthy enough to support 2 wives and multiple households without some kind of illegal activity? Marcus showed me bank statements, Linda said defensively. He had millions of dollars in accounts. He bought me a car, paid for my apartment, took me on expensive trips. All with stolen money, Agent Rodriguez explained. Money that belonged to Bennett and Sarah's education funds. Linda looked at me and Sarah with growing horror. I didn't know he had children. Marcus told me Patricia couldn't have kids and that he was basically taking care of her out of obligation. Patricia's anger finally erupted. You've been sleeping with my husband for months while helping him plan my death, and you didn't think to question any of it? He said you two were getting divorced, Linda protested weakly. He said the marriage was already over and that you were just living together until the paperwork was finalized. Agent Rodriguez leaned forward. Linda, we have recordings of conversations where you and Marcus discussed the best methods for staging Patricia's suicide. Would you like to hear them? She played an audio clip from her phone. Marcus's voice was clearly audible. Patricia already seems depressed and confused most of the time. It won't be hard to convince people. She couldn't handle the stress of my mother's estate being contested. Linda's voice responded. What about the children? Won't they be suspicious if their stepmother suddenly kills herself? The kids will inherit eventually anyway, Marcus replied. And they'll be easier to control without Patricia interfering. Linda broke down completely. I thought we were going to live happily ever after. Marcus promised me we'd travel the world once the inheritance was settled. There was no real inheritance, Eleanor said sadly. Marcus stole money from trust funds that belonged to his children. Even if his plan had succeeded, the money would have been gone within a year because of his gambling addiction. Agent Rodriguez showed Linda financial records. Your boyfriend has lost $800,000 in casinos and sports betting over the past 2 years. He owes another $400,000 to loan sharks who are expecting payment within 30 days. Linda stared at the gambling losses in disbelief. Marcus told me he was a successful day trader. He said that's how he made so much money so quickly. He was lying about everything, Patricia said, just like he lied to me about drugging my coffee and destroying my credit. Agent Rodriguez turned to Eleanor. Mrs. Hawthorne, we need to discuss your son's current situation. Our negotiators haven't made any progress, and we're concerned about the explosive devices he claims to have. Eleanor nodded toward the house, where my father remained barricaded. Agent Rodriguez, I know my son better than anyone. Marcus is a coward and a liar, but he's not suicidal. If he really had explosives, he would have used them by now, rather than risk capture. What do you think he's actually doing in there? Agent Rodriguez asked. Destroying evidence, Eleanor replied immediately. Computer files, documents, anything that might incriminate him further. Marcus is buying time to cover his tracks. David checked his watch. It's been almost 45 minutes since he locked himself in that office. That's plenty of time to delete financial records and communication logs. Suddenly, my father's voice came over the bullhorn again. I want to speak to Eleanor privately. Send her to the front door alone, or I start detonating devices. Agent Rodriguez shook her head immediately. Absolutely not. We're not sending civilians into a potentially dangerous situation. Eleanor stood up with determination. Agent Rodriguez, I'm going to talk to my son. Mrs. Hawthorne, I cannot allow that. It's too risky. Marcus won't hurt me, Eleanor said confidently. He needs me alive to access my real fortune. Whatever he thinks he's stolen so far is nothing compared to the actual wealth he believes he can inherit. She looked at me seriously. Bennett, if something does happen to me, David has all the legal documents necessary to ensure you and Sarah are protected. The foundation I've established will take care of your education and future. Before Agent Rodriguez could stop her, Eleanor walked out of the mobile command unit and headed toward our front door. Eleanor approached the house slowly, her hands visible and empty. The SWAT team had taken positions behind vehicles and trees, their weapons trained on the windows where my father might appear. Marcus, I'm here, Eleanor called out. Let's discuss this situation like adults. My father's voice came from his office window, which faced the street. Stay where you are, Mother. I can see you from here. What do you want, Marcus? Eleanor asked calmly. I want you to wire $50 million to an offshore account I've set up, my father replied. In exchange, I'll surrender peacefully and no one gets hurt. You know I can't do that, son. Apart from the logistics, you've committed serious crimes that have to be addressed through the legal system. Then people are going to die tonight, my father shouted. Starting with Sarah if anyone tries to storm this office. My blood ran cold. Sarah grabbed my arm, terrified by the direct threat against her life. Agent Rodriguez spoke into her radio. All units hold position. Do not advance on the house. Eleanor's voice remained steady. Marcus, Sarah is your daughter. You don't want to hurt your own child. She's not my real daughter, my father replied coldly. None of them are real family. You're the only one with actual value because you control the money. I felt sick hearing him dismiss Sarah so casually. She'd always tried to defend him, believing he loved her despite his controlling behavior. That's not true and you know it, Eleanor said firmly. You love your children, Marcus. Your problem is that you don't know how to separate love from control. Love doesn't pay gambling debts, my father shot back. Love doesn't keep dangerous men from threatening to break your legs. I need cash, Mother, not family therapy. Agent Rodriguez received a report through her earpiece and turned to David. Our bomb squad has examined the exterior of the house with remote cameras. They don't detect any explosive devices near the windows or doors. Marcus is bluffing, David said confidently. He's trying to buy time for something else. Suddenly, we heard the sound of engines approaching from the opposite direction. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows drove slowly down our street, stopping just outside the police barriers. Several men in expensive suits got out of the vehicles, and Agent Rodriguez immediately dispatched officers to intercept them. Those are the loan sharks, David whispered. Marcus's gambling creditors. One of the men, a large individual with gold chains around his neck, pushed past the police barriers and walked directly toward the FBI command post. I need to speak with whoever's in charge here, the man said in a heavy Russian accent. My name is Viktor Petrov, and I have business with Marcus Hawthorne. Agent Rodriguez stepped forward. Mr. Petrov, this is an active federal crime scene. You need to leave immediately. Marcus owes my organization $400,000, Victor replied. Payment was due yesterday. If he cannot pay, we have alternative collection methods. Are you threatening violence against a suspect in federal custody? Agent Rodriguez asked. Victor smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I'm simply explaining that Marcus has obligations beyond whatever legal troubles he's experiencing. Obligations that don't disappear because of arrest warrants. Eleanor overheard this conversation and turned away from the house. Mr. Petrov, I'm Eleanor Hawthorne, Marcus's mother. Perhaps we can discuss a resolution to this debt situation. Victor studied Eleanor appraisingly. You're the dead billionaire grandmother we heard about. I'm very much alive, as you can see, and I'm prepared to negotiate payment of my son's gambling debts in exchange for guaranteed safety for this family. The debt has grown with interest and penalties, Victor said. Total amount owed is now $600,000. Eleanor didn't flinch. That can be arranged. But I need assurances that no harm will come to any family members, regardless of what happens to Marcus. Agent Rodriguez interrupted. Mrs. Hawthorne, you cannot negotiate with criminal organizations. This conversation needs to end immediately. Victor ignored her. Mrs. Hawthorne, your son has been claiming for weeks that he would inherit billions when his mother's estate was finalized. If this is true, $600,000 should not be a problem. My son has been lying to you, Eleanor replied bluntly. He's stolen approximately $3 million from his children's trust funds and lost most of it through gambling. There is no massive inheritance coming. Victor's expression darkened. Then Marcus has been fraudulently representing his ability to repay our loans. I'm afraid so. But as I said, I'm willing to settle his debts to protect my grandchildren. Before Victor could respond, my father's voice echoed from the house again. Mother, who are you talking to out there? Business associates of yours? Eleanor called back. They're concerned about money you owe them. Tell them to wait, my father shouted. Once you transfer the $50 million, I can pay everyone back. Victor laughed harshly. $50 million? This fool thinks he can extort his own mother. Agent Rodriguez's patience was running out. Everyone except law enforcement personnel needs to clear this area immediately. We have a hostage situation to resolve. At that moment, one of the bomb squad technicians approached with a tablet computer. Agent Rodriguez, we've completed thermal imaging scans of the house. There's only one person inside, located in the back office. No heat signatures from explosive devices or detonators. Marcus is definitely bluffing about the bombs, David confirmed. Agent Rodriguez made a decision. Mrs. Hawthorne, we're going to end this standoff. Please move to a safe distance. Eleanor shook her head. Let me try one more approach. I think I can convince Marcus to surrender without violence. She walked closer to the house and called out, Marcus, I've spoken with your creditors. They're willing to accept payment, but only if you cooperate fully with the federal investigation. What does that mean? My father asked. It means you surrender now, plead guilty to the charges, and provide complete information about everyone you've worked with in these fraud schemes. In exchange, I'll pay your gambling debts and hire the best criminal defense attorney in Colorado. There was a long silence from inside the house. Finally, my father asked, What about Linda? Is she going to prison? Linda is facing her own charges, Eleanor replied honestly, but her cooperation with investigators could reduce her sentence significantly. And Patricia? The kids? They're victims in this situation, Marcus. They'll receive counseling and support to rebuild their lives. Sarah will attend the best private school in Denver, and Bennett will finally get the college education you stole from him. Another long pause. What about me? How long will I be in prison? That depends on many factors, Eleanor said. But I promise you'll have excellent legal representation and family support throughout the process. And, when you're released, there will be opportunities for redemption if you genuinely change your behavior. Agent Rodriguez spoke into her radio. All units prepare for suspect surrender. Target may be exiting the building voluntarily. We heard furniture being moved inside the office, followed by the sound of a door opening. My father appeared in the front doorway, his hands raised above his head. He looked exhausted and defeated. I don't have any weapons, he called out, and there are no explosives. I just needed time to think. SWAT officers moved in quickly, securing him with handcuffs before escorting him toward the FBI vehicles. As my father passed Eleanor, he stopped and looked at her with tears in his eyes. I'm sorry, Mother. I'm sorry for everything. I never meant for it to go this far. Eleanor reached out and touched his face gently. I know you didn't, Marcus, but sorry isn't enough anymore. You have to do the work to make amends. Agent Rodriguez took custody of my father, while Victor Petrov approached Eleanor again. Mrs. Hawthorne, we still need to discuss the debt situation. Eleanor turned to him with a steely expression. Mr. Petrov, you'll have your money within 48 hours. But if I ever discover that you or your associates have threatened my family again, you'll find that I have resources that make your organization look like a neighborhood bingo game. Victor studied her for a moment, then nodded respectfully. Understood. We appreciate your professionalism in resolving this matter. As the Russian men drove away, and my father was loaded into an FBI vehicle, I realized that the immediate crisis was over. But looking at Sarah's tear-stained face and Patricia's shocked expression, I knew that healing our family was going to be a much longer and more difficult process. 3 weeks later, I sat in Eleanor's Denver law office, still processing everything that had happened on Christmas Eve. My father was in federal detention, awaiting trial. Linda had agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence, and our family was beginning the long process of rebuilding our lives. Eleanor had been remarkably thorough in addressing every aspect of the damage my father had caused. She'd hired a team of attorneys, counselors, and financial advisors to help Patricia, Sarah, and me navigate the aftermath of years of psychological and financial abuse. Bennett, there's something important I need to discuss with you, Eleanor said, pulling out a thick legal document, something I haven't told anyone else yet. I looked at the papers she placed in front of me. They appeared to be some kind of trust or estate documents. What is this? I asked. Eleanor sat down across from me, her expression serious but warm. A confession, in a way. I've been manipulating this situation far longer than anyone realizes. I felt a chill of unease. What do you mean? My death wasn't just staged to test Marcus, Eleanor explained. It was part of a comprehensive plan to save him from destroying himself and everyone around him. She opened to a specific page in the document. I hired actors to pose as gambling associates and loan sharks. The Russian men you met, the threats against our family, the escalating debts. All of it was carefully orchestrated to force Marcus into a position where he would have to face consequences for his behavior. I stared at her in shock. Victor Petrov wasn't real? Oh, he's real, Eleanor said with a slight smile. But he works for a private security company I've used for years. Very good actor, actually. Former KGB, so he has the appropriate background for the role. My mind reeled as I processed this revelation. So Dad was never actually in danger from loan sharks? Marcus was in danger, but from his own choices and criminal behavior, Eleanor clarified. The gambling debts were real, Bennett. I simply controlled the collection methods to ensure no one was actually harmed. She pulled out more documents. I've been funding rehabilitation programs for white-collar criminals for 15 years. I know what works and what doesn't when it comes to helping people like Marcus change their lives. Why didn't you just confront him directly 3 years ago? I asked. Because he would have denied everything and found better ways to hide his criminal behavior, Eleanor replied. I needed Marcus to reveal the full extent of what he was doing. Not just the financial crimes, but the psychological abuse, the systematic control, the willingness to harm innocent people. She showed me surveillance photos I'd never seen before. My investigators have been protecting this family for years, Bennett. We prevented 3 attempts by real criminals to target Marcus for his supposed wealth. We intercepted attempts by actual dangerous people to kidnap Sarah for ransom money they believed Marcus possessed. I looked at the photos showing men with weapons near our house. These were real threats? Very real. Marcus's lies about inheriting billions created genuine danger for everyone in this household. My security team has been working around the clock to keep all of you safe while building a case that would hold up in federal court. Eleanor opened another section of the legal documents. There's something else you need to know about your inheritance. She showed me financial statements that took my breath away. The numbers were staggering. $2.7 billion, Eleanor said simply. That's the current value of Hawthorne Tech Industries and associated investments, and as of today, you are the sole beneficiary of everything. I couldn't speak. The amount of money was beyond anything I could comprehend. But there's a condition, Eleanor continued. You must personally oversee Marcus's rehabilitation and reintegration into society. You'll have complete authority over his treatment program, his living arrangements after prison, and his access to family relationships. She pulled out one final document. This is a contract that gives you legal guardianship over Marcus's future. He's agreed to submit to whatever conditions you establish for his recovery process. Why would you put me in charge of that? I asked. Because you're the only person who truly understands both his potential for good and his capacity for harm, Eleanor explained. Patricia deserves to rebuild her life without having to manage Marcus's recovery. Sarah needs to focus on her education and healing from years of psychological manipulation. She leaned forward, her eyes intense with purpose. But you, Bennett, have the strength and wisdom to help your father become the man he should have been all along. You also have the authority to cut him off completely if he refuses to change. I looked at the documents again, feeling overwhelmed by the responsibility. What if I'm not ready for this kind of decision-making? Eleanor smiled warmly. Then you'll learn, just like I did when I took over my father's company at age 25. I'll be here to guide you for as long as you need. She stood up and walked to the window overlooking downtown Denver. Bennett, your father isn't evil. He's broken. Broken by his own father's abuse. Broken by addiction. Broken by fear and insecurity that drove him to hurt the people he loved most. That doesn't excuse what he did to us, I said. Of course not. But it explains why traditional punishment alone won't solve the problem. Marcus needs accountability combined with genuine support for behavioral change. And that support has to come from family, because no one else will care enough to hold him to the highest standards. Eleanor returned to her seat. I'm giving you the resources to save your father's soul, if that's what you choose to do. Or the resources to ensure he never hurts anyone again, if that's the path he forces you to take. I thought about Sarah's tears, about Patricia's confusion when she discovered she'd been drugged for months, about my own lost opportunities for education and career advancement. What if he refuses to cooperate with rehabilitation? I asked. Then he spends the rest of his life in a minimum security facility with access to books, education, and counseling, but no contact with family members and no possibility of parole, Eleanor said matter-of-factly. The choice is entirely his to make. She pulled out her phone and showed me a video call interface. There's someone who wants to speak with you. The screen connected, revealing a woman with kind eyes and graying brown hair. She looked familiar, though older than I remembered. Hello, Bennett, the woman said softly. I'm your mother. My heart nearly stopped. Jennifer? I've been waiting to talk to you for so long, she said, tears in her eyes. Eleanor explained everything that happened. I'm so proud of how strong you've become despite everything you've been through. I found myself crying for the first time in years. I thought you didn't love us anymore. I never stopped loving you and Sarah, Jennifer replied. I fought in court for 3 years trying to prove the charges against me were false. When Eleanor contacted me 6 months ago and explained her plan to expose Marcus's crimes, I agreed to wait until the legal situation was resolved. Eleanor handed me tissues. Jennifer has taken a temporary position at Denver General Hospital. She'll be living here while you and Sarah rebuild your relationship with her. What about Patricia? I asked. Patricia is my friend, Jennifer said simply. We've already talked several times. She's not the enemy here, Bennett. We were both victims of Marcus's manipulation. Eleanor showed me one more document. Patricia is starting law school next month with full scholarship funding from my foundation. She wants to specialize in helping families escape financial abuse. I looked around the office at all the legal documents, financial statements, and family photos Eleanor had assembled. She'd orchestrated an incredibly complex plan to save our family while ensuring justice was served. When do I have to make decisions about Dad's future? I asked. Not for several months, Eleanor replied. He needs to complete psychological evaluation and begin intensive therapy before anyone can assess his potential for genuine change. You'll have time to heal from your own trauma before taking on responsibility for his recovery. She stood up and walked to a safe in the corner of her office. But there's one decision I need you to make immediately. Eleanor removed a small wooden box and placed it in front of me. This contains your grandfather's wedding ring. He built Hawthorne Tech from nothing, using integrity and innovation rather than manipulation and theft. I opened the box to find a simple gold band with an inscription. Build something worthy of the next generation. If you accept responsibility for our family's future, you'll wear that ring, Eleanor said. It means you commit to using our resources to help people rather than exploit them. It means you promise to break the cycle of abuse that has affected 3 generations of Hawthorne men. I picked up the ring and held it in the light. It felt heavier than it looked. What if I fail? I asked. Then you'll learn from the failure and try again, Eleanor replied. That's what family means, Bennett. We support each other through mistakes while holding each other accountable for growth. I slipped the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. I accept the responsibility, I said. Eleanor smiled with genuine pride. Then let's get started. We have a lot of work to do. 6 months later, I stood in front of 200 people at the Denver Convention Center, delivering the keynote address for the National Conference on Family Financial Abuse. The audience included social workers, attorneys, law enforcement officers, and survivors of economic domestic violence. Good morning, everyone. My name is Bennett Hawthorne, and 18 months ago, I was locked outside my house in freezing weather by a father who had systematically destroyed every opportunity for independence I'd ever had. I looked out at the faces in the audience, seeing recognition and understanding in their expressions. Today, I want to talk about something counterintuitive, how forgiveness and accountability can coexist, and why healing families sometimes requires more courage than abandoning them. I clicked to the first slide of my presentation, which showed a photo of our family from Christmas 2 years ago. My father, Patricia, Sarah, and me, all smiling for the camera while hiding the dysfunction that ruled our daily lives. This picture represents everything that was wrong with how we understood family loyalty. We thought protecting secrets was the same as protecting each other. We confused enabling destructive behavior with showing love. The next slide showed our family as it looked today. Eleanor, Jennifer, Patricia, Sarah, and me at Sarah's high school graduation ceremony. My father was notably absent, but his absence felt healthy rather than tragic. Transformation is possible, but only when everyone involved commits to truth over comfort, accountability over excuses, and genuine change over temporary promises. I shared the story of my father's arrest and trial, his conviction on multiple federal charges, and his current participation in an innovative rehabilitation program that Eleanor's foundation had developed specifically for white-collar criminals. Marcus Hawthorne pleaded guilty to bank fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and domestic abuse charges. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison with the possibility of supervised release after 5 years if he completes intensive psychological treatment. I clicked to a photo of my father in his prison uniform, participating in a group therapy session. But here's the part that surprises people. I visit him every month, not because I've forgotten what he did to our family, but because I refuse to give up on the possibility that he can become a better person. I explained how Eleanor's foundation had created the most comprehensive family abuse recovery program in the country, serving over 800 families in the past year alone. We've learned that punishment alone doesn't heal families, Neither does forgiveness without accountability. Real healing requires a third option: conditional restoration based on demonstrated behavioral change. The audience listened intently as I described our family's current dynamics. Patricia had graduated law school and was working as a victim advocate. Sarah was excelling in her senior year and planned to study psychology in college. Jennifer had become the head nurse at Denver General's emergency department and was helping train medical staff to recognize signs of domestic abuse. Eleanor Hawthorne, my grandmother who faked her own death to save our family, passed away peacefully 3 months ago, at age 78. She left behind a foundation that will continue helping families escape financial abuse for generations. I paused, feeling the weight of Eleanor's absence but also the strength of her legacy. On her deathbed, Eleanor told me something I want to share with all of you. She said that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's loving someone enough to hold them accountable for becoming their best self, even when that accountability is painful for everyone involved. I showed the final slide, which contained Eleanor's favorite quote from Maya Angelou. "When we know better, we do better." My father may never fully heal from the trauma and addiction that drove him to hurt his family, but Sarah will never doubt her worth because of systematic psychological manipulation. Patricia will never again be drugged into compliance with someone else's criminal behavior, and I will never again believe that my value depends on someone else's approval. I looked out at the audience, many of whom were wiping away tears. The greatest gift we can give the next generation isn't protection from all hardship, it's the tools to transform hardship into wisdom, pain into purpose, and survival into service. After my presentation, I answered questions for another hour. Many audience members shared their own stories of family abuse and recovery. Several attorneys asked for information about Eleanor's legal strategies for helping families escape financial control. As the conference ended, I received a text message from Sarah. "Watched your speech online. So proud of you, big brother. Dad called me yesterday from prison. He's been sober for 4 months and wants to start family therapy sessions when you're ready." I smiled and typed back, "We'll talk about it this weekend. How's your college application essay coming along?" "Almost finished. It's about how surviving trauma taught me to help other people heal." "Think Eleanor would be proud?" "She'd be over the moon," I replied. I drove home to the house Eleanor had left me, a modest but comfortable place in downtown Denver where I could walk to the foundation offices every morning. The mansion where my father had committed his crimes had been sold, with proceeds going to victim compensation funds. That evening, I sat in my study reviewing applications for the Hawthorne Family Recovery Scholarship Program. We were funding college education for 60 young adults whose families had experienced financial abuse. Each applicant had written essays about their goals for breaking cycles of harm and building healthier communities. One application particularly caught my attention. A 20-year-old woman named Rebecca, whose mother had hidden her academic achievements to keep her financially dependent. Rebecca was now studying social work and planned to specialize in helping children recognize early warning signs of family financial abuse. I approved her scholarship immediately. My phone rang, and I saw Jennifer's name on the caller ID. "Hi, Mom," I said. The words still felt new, but increasingly natural. "Hello, sweetheart. I wanted to let you know that Patricia and I finished preparing the presentation for next week's congressional hearing on family financial crimes legislation." Jennifer and Patricia had become fierce advocates for stronger legal protections for abuse survivors. They were testifying before Congress about the need for federal banking regulations that would flag suspicious inheritance and trust fund transfers. "How's the legislation looking?" I asked. "Very promising. Senator Martinez thinks we have enough support to pass comprehensive reforms by the end of the year." I felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that our family's suffering was being transformed into protection for other families. "Are you still planning to visit your father next week?" Jennifer asked gently. "Yes. His counselor thinks he's ready for a family session with Sarah and me. How do you feel about that?" I considered the question carefully, hopeful but cautious. Dad has made real progress in therapy, but trust has to be rebuilt through consistent behavior over time. "That's very wise," Jennifer said. "Eleanor would be so proud of the man you've become." After we hung up, I sat quietly in Eleanor's favorite chair, thinking about the journey our family had taken. From that Christmas Eve when I stood freezing outside our house, believing I had no power to change my circumstances, to this moment when I was helping hundreds of other families find their own paths to healing. I pulled out my phone and recorded a video message for the Foundation's social media channels. My name is Bennett Hawthorne, and I want to leave you with a question that changed my life. When someone you love hurts you deeply, what's the difference between giving up on them and holding them accountable for change? I paused, looking directly into the camera. The difference is hope. Not hope that ignores reality, but hope that demands better. Hope that says, I love you enough to expect you to grow. I care about you enough to stop enabling your harmful behavior. And I believe in you enough to keep the door open for redemption, as long as you're willing to walk through it. I ended the recording and posted it online with the caption, Healing is possible. Transformation is real, but both require courage from everyone involved. Within an hour, the video had received hundreds of comments from people sharing their own stories of family recovery and expressing gratitude for programs like the ones Eleanor had created. As I prepared for bed that night, I realized that Christmas Eve, 18 months ago, had been the end of one story and the beginning of another. The story that ended was about a family trapped in cycles of abuse, control, and deception. The story that began was about the choice to transform pain into purpose, to use our resources for healing rather than harm, and to prove that forgiveness and accountability can create something stronger than either approach could achieve alone. Tomorrow, I would visit my father in prison. Next month, Sarah would start college with a full scholarship and dreams of becoming a family therapist. Next year, Patricia would open her own law practice, specializing in helping abuse survivors reclaim their financial independence. And Eleanor's foundation would continue growing, creating programs that offered families something our society rarely provides, a genuine path from survival to transformation, from trauma to service, from brokenness to wholeness. I looked at my grandfather's ring, remembering Eleanor's words about building something worthy of the next generation. For the first time in my life, I felt truly worthy of wearing it. The greatest inheritance isn't money, it's the courage to break cycles of harm and the wisdom to help others do the same. As I turned off the lights, I thought about all the families who would find hope through Eleanor's programs, all the children who would grow up free from financial abuse, and all the parents who would choose accountability over denial because they saw that change was possible. Some stories end with revenge, some end with forgiveness. The best stories end with transformation that helps the next person who faces the same struggle. That's the legacy Eleanor left us. That's the legacy I choose to continue. And that's how one family's worst night became the foundation for thousands of families' best futures. I have a question for you. Think about a time when someone you cared about hurt you deeply. What would have needed to happen for that relationship to heal in a way that made everyone stronger? Share your thoughts in the comments below because your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button, subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges, and share this with anyone who might benefit from knowing that healing and transformation are always possible, no matter how dark things seem. Thank you for taking this journey with me, and remember, you have more strength than you realize and more power to create positive change than you've ever imagined. Until next time, keep believing in the possibility of transformation, keep demanding accountability with love, and keep building something worthy of the next generation.